So if I told you that putting on a pair of sunglasses before stepping out onto the beach might actually increase your risk of permanent eye damage.
You'd probably think we were out of our minds.
Right. I mean, I would. Because we're all taught from childhood that, you grab your swimsuit, you slap on whatever lotion is on sale, you put on your dark shades, and you're good to go. You're fully protected.
Yeah, it feels like a completely solved problem. Like
Yeah.
the general assumption is that simply having a barrier, literally any barrier, is doing the job.
But when you actually start looking at the clinical data, I mean, that assumption just completely falls apart. It's wild. You read one article saying the sun is out to get you, and then the next article says the chemicals in your sunscreen are actually worse than the ultraviolet radiation itself.
Exactly. And it turns this simple pharmacy run into this overwhelming anxiety-inducing research project.
Where you're just paralyzed by all this conflicting advice.
And that paralysis is exactly what leaves people vulnerable, not just to the sun, but to, frankly, an incredibly profitable industry of misinformation. One that thrives on confusing consumers about what's actually happening at a cellular level.
Which is exactly the mission for today's deep dive. Whether you're, heading into the summer or maybe planning a winter getaway, you need to know how to actually protect your skin and your eyes without falling for all that internet fiction.
And we have some really incredible source material to help us do that today.
We do. We have a heavy-hitting stack of notes today. We are looking at a highly detailed clinical review from Québec Pharmacie, and this document was written specifically to demystify sun protection for healthcare professionals.
Right, it's not a consumer magazine piece.
No, not at all. It strips away the marketing, it ignores the wellness influencers, and it looks purely at the clinical evidence. It's packed with real-world case studies and some truly surprising data.
It's a fantastic resource, really, because it forces us to look at the actual mechanics of sun protection. It gives us a very clear picture of what we're actually fighting against, how the body responds to that threat, and how the tools we have actually interact with our biology.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can talk about the armor you wear, we really need to understand the weapon we're up against. And looking at the statistics from Canada in 2017, the sun is a very serious weapon. We're talking about 7,200 melanoma diagnoses in a single year and 12,250 deaths.
Yeah, the human cost is just staggering. And unfortunately, those rates have been climbing. But the clinical review highlights something even more revealing, which is how your immediate environment dictates that risk.
Right.
The data shows that a person living in Toronto actually has a 16% higher risk of developing melanoma compared to someone living in Montreal.
A 16% difference just between two cities in the same region. I mean, let me guess, this isn't just about a slight difference in latitude.
No, not at all. I mean, the ambient UV index of your specific environment matters immensely, but it goes way deeper than just the weather. The data clearly shows that outdoor workers, individuals from lower income households, and those with less formal education are all at a significantly higher risk.
Oh.
So this tells us that melanoma isn't just this biological inevitability. It's heavily driven by chronic exposure, occupational hazards, and, frankly, a lack of access to proper preventative education.
And a massive part of that preventative education, I'd imagine, is dismantling the myth of the healthy glow.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this idea is so deeply ingrained in our culture. The notion that coming back from vacation with a tan means you look vibrant and rested. But the clinical data here leaves zero room for debate. The biological process of tanning is strictly a sign of skin damage. Full stop.
Yes, it is literally a distress signal.
Right. And people with naturally dark skin absolutely still need protection because that underlying cellular damage is still occurring, even if they don't turn red.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The physiological response, it's called melanogenesis, the actual process of tanning. That is your skin's desperate attempt to build, like a tiny parasol, over your cell's DNA to shield it from further destruction.
That's a crazy visual, a tiny parasol.
Yeah. And to understand why your skin is panicking like that, we have to look at the radiation itself. The sun emits different wavelengths of ultraviolet light.
Yeah.
UVC is almost entirely blocked by the Earth's ozone layer, thankfully. But we are constantly bombarded by UVB and UVA.
See, I always used to think of them as basically the same thing, just, different letters. But the mechanics are entirely different. Think about it like a home invasion.
Okay, I like this.
UVB is the loud burglar who smashes a window to get in. It's the fire that burns your house down today. It causes the immediate inflammatory response, the sunburn. You know exactly when UVB has hit you because the alarms go off, your skin turns red, and it hurts. But UVA is more like a sneaky thief who quietly picks the lock, sneaks in, and rewires the house's alarm system. like a colony of termites eating the foundation. You don't feel them, you don't see the damage today, but in 10 years, the whole structure collapses.
That structural collapse analogy is perfect for what happens in the dermis, actually.
Mm.
Because UVA rays have a longer wavelength, they don't cause that immediate painful redness. They are the silent danger.
Because they penetrate deeper.
Exactly. They easily pass right through glass, which UVB generally doesn't do. They bypass those superficial layers and penetrate deep into the dermis.
And what are they doing once they get down there, into the deep tissue?
They're generating highly reactive oxygen species, carcinogenic free radicals.
That makes...
Yeah. These molecules essentially tear through structural proteins like collagen and elastin, which is what causes premature aging. But far more dangerously, they actually potentiate the cancer-causing effects of the UVB rays.
So they work together to cause damage.
They do. Both types of rays cause direct double-strand breaks in your cellular DNA, and that initiates the genetic mutations that lead directly to skin cancer. Plus, if a patient is taking certain photosensitizing medications, like specific antibiotics or blood pressure meds, their skin's natural defenses are lowered.
Making the destruction even faster.
Exponentially faster, yes.
So, I mean, the biological threat is undeniable. The obvious solution is to just put a barrier between the UV radiation and our skin. But the second you bring up sunscreen, the internet controversy just kicks into high gear.
Oh, it really does.
People are out there claiming that sunscreen is actually the thing causing the cancer, or that, it's going to leave you with a massive vitamin deficiency.
The sunscreen paradox. This is where looking at the evolution of clinical data is so useful. Let's look at the cancer myth first. Years ago, some early case control studies did suggest a correlation between sunscreen use and an increased risk of melanoma.
Which I imagine was absolutely terrifying for the medical community at the time.
It was.
But I'm assuming there was a massive flaw in how those studies were structured, right?
A profound flaw, yes. They failed entirely to account for confounding variables. The researchers didn't properly factor in natural skin pigmentation, a person's history of blistering sunburns, or their childhood sun exposure.
Oh, so the people slathering on the most sunscreen were probably the people who were inherently at a higher risk to begin with.
Exactly. And furthermore, they were using that sunscreen as a license to stay out in the dangerous midday sun for hours on end.
Right. It gave them a false sense of invincibility. They just stayed out there baking, sweating off the lotion, and soaking up the radiation.
Exactly. And we finally got the definitive proof in 2011 with a massive 10-year randomized study. It put the whole thing to rest. They took two groups of people. One group applied sunscreen every single day as a strict, non-negotiable routine.
Okay.
The other group applied it only voluntarily, whenever they felt like it. Over 10 years, the daily sunscreen group had half the number of melanomas, 11 cases out of 812 people.
Let me guess. The voluntary group, the ones who only used it when they felt like they were getting too much sun, they had significantly worse outcomes because human beings are terrible at guessing their actual UV exposure.
Spot on.
Mm.
They had double the rate, 22 cases out of 809 people. And the tumors they did develop were significantly more invasive. It is definitive, long-term clinical proof that regular application prevents cancer.
Well, that settles the cancer debate, but sun exposure isn't just about avoiding damage, right? There's a biological synthesis happening too.
You talk about vitamin D.
Yeah. We know the mechanism for vitamin D UVB rays hit a compound in the skin, 7-dehydrocholesterol?
That's the one.
Right, which synthesizes into vitamin D3. So the logic follows. If we block the UVB with sunscreen, aren't we basically shutting down our body's ability to make this crucial vitamin?
It's a very fair question. Vitamin D deficiency is a serious issue. It's linked to an increased risk of falls, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, you name it. So the concern is incredibly valid. But a massive 2009 clinical review of nearly 6,000 patients revealed that applying sunscreen in normal, real-world circumstances does not cause a vitamin D deficiency.
Really?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, they found that wearing long sleeves and actively seeking shade did lower vitamin D levels significantly, especially in Caucasian populations.
Okay, I have to push back a little here on the medical advice, though, because if seeking shade and wearing clothes lowers your vitamin D, and we're simultaneously told to avoid the sun to prevent melanoma,
I see where you're going.
are dermatologists really expecting people to live like vampires, like just block out the sun entirely and pop vitamin D pills for the rest of their lives? I mean, is that actually a realistic public health strategy?
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the risk calculus in modern medicine. The proven, devastating, and often fatal risk of developing melanoma from unprotected UV exposure vastly outweighs the theoretical risk of a vitamin D deficiency.
Because one kills you directly and the other is just a deficiency.
Right. A deficiency is incredibly easy to manage safely with an oral supplement. You simply do not need to play Russian roulette with skin cancer just to get your daily vitamins.
Fair enough. The cancer risk is the anvil on the scale. But solving one problem creates another, which brings us to the chemical conundrum. Because we are slathering complex chemical formulations all over our body's largest organ.
Yes, we are.
And I see people screaming online about ingredients like oxybenzone. They say it's a massive endocrine disruptor.
Oxybenzone is a chemical filter that absorbs both UVA and UVB rays. And the internet panic stems from certain in vivo animal studies where rats were given oxybenzone orally, and the researchers did indeed detect estrogenic effects.
Well, an estrogenic effect in a rat sounds like a perfectly valid reason for a consumer to be concerned, no?
It sounds alarming until you look at the pharmacokinetics and the dosing. The doses force-fed to those rats were astronomically high. When researchers applied mathematical models to human usage, they found something crazy.
What's that?
A human being would have to apply a 6% oxybenzone sunscreen covering their entire body every single day for 277 years to reach the blood concentration that caused that effect in rats.
Wait, 277 years?
Yes, and subsequent studies on humans applying it topically show no significant hormone alteration.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because panicking about the 277-year statistic, it's like someone warning you not to eat an organic apple, because apple seeds contain a precursor to cyanide.
That's a great comparison.
Right. I mean, the chemical presence is technically true, but you'd have to eat something like 40,000 apple seeds in one sitting to actually get cyanide poisoning. The dose makes the poison.
Absolutely. Now, that doesn't mean oxybenzone is a perfect ingredient. While it won't disrupt human hormones, it is a known environmental contaminant. It causes severe long-term damage to coral reefs.
Ah, right. The reef-safe stuff.
Exactly. And beyond the environmental impact, it's actually one of the leading causes of contact dermatitis, alongside a common preservative called MI, or methylisophiazolinone.
So it's irritating.
Very. Because of this high irritation risk, the clinical review clearly recommends avoiding oxybenzone on children or anyone with sensitive skin.
Okay, so if chemical filters are irritating or bad for the reefs, the obvious next step is to physically block the sun rather than chemically absorb it, which is where zinc oxide and titanium dioxide come in. But of course, the internet has found a reason to panic about those too.
Naturally.
Specifically when they are ground down into microscopic nanoparticles.
Yeah, the controversy over physical filters was based on in vitro laboratory studies showing that when these nanoparticles are exposed to UV light, they can produce the very same damaging free radicals we're trying to avoid.
Which sounds completely counterproductive.
It does, but context is everything.
Yeah.
In actual commercially available sunscreens, these nanoparticles are specially coated in compounds like silica or dimethicone. That coating almost entirely traps those reactive oxygen species.
Oh, I see.
Furthermore, clinical trials show these particles rarely, if ever, cross the stratum corneum, the outermost layer of dead skin cells. They sit on top, doing their job by physically reflecting the light.
So they're essentially like a suit of armor sitting on the outside of the castle wall. They never actually get inside.
Exactly, as long as the castle wall is intact. The review does advise caution if the skin barrier is broken or severely altered.
Like what?
For example, a patient suffering from severe eczema or an open wound. We simply have less long-term data on nanoparticle absorption through significantly compromised skin.
Which perfectly transitions us from the theoretical science to the messy reality of actually applying this stuff. Because the clinical review gives us this brilliant case study about a woman named Sabrina. Let's look at her situation, because it mirrors the exact chaos of planning a family vacation.
It really does. It's so relatable.
So, Sabrina is going on a trip to Cuba. She has pale skin. She's traveling with her equally pale partner, her 2-year-old daughter, and her mother-in-law. And the mother-in-law just finished a topical chemotherapy skin treatment called Efudex.
It's the ultimate real-world test case. Efudex, or 5-fluorouracil, it destroys precancerous cells. But in doing so, it leaves the skin raw, inflamed, and incredibly fragile. The protective barrier is essentially gone.
Right, and Sabrina's first instinct is the one we all have. Can I just dig under the bathroom sink and use the half-empty bottles of sunscreen from last year's beach trip?
Please don't do that. The clinical advice is absolutely clear here.
Yeah.
Check the expiration date. But even if it isn't technically expired, if the color, the smell, or the texture has changed, you must throw it away.
Because it goes bad.
Sunscreens are delicate emulsions. And think about how we transport them. We bake them in a hot car trunk, or they sit in a boiling beach bag for 6 hours. That extreme heat causes the chemical emulsion to break down. The oil and water phases separate. Yeah, and when you apply it, you aren't getting a uniform shield. You're applying patchy streaks of separated chemicals that leave massive gaps for UV radiation to pour through.
Okay, so Sabrina is smart. She's buying new sunscreen. She gets to the pharmacy aisle. What is she actually looking for to protect her toddler and her highly vulnerable mother-in-law? The review emphasizes looking for the Canadian Dermatology Association's Seal the CDA logo. It looks like a little sword and shield.
Right, and that logo removes all the guesswork. It guarantees the product has met strict clinical criteria. It ensures an SPF of at least 30. It provides broad spectrum protection against both UVA and UVB. It's non-comedogenic, so it won't trigger acne. It's non-irritating, and it's unfragranced. It's the safest bet for fragile skin.
Let's talk about the SPF numbers themselves, though, because most of us know that SPF follows a curve of diminishing returns.
Yes, it does.
An SPF 30 blocks approximately 97% of UVB rays. An SPF 50 blocks 98%. So it isn't a massive leap, it's just 1%. Why on earth are there bottles of SPF 100 on the shelves? Is there any actual clinical benefit to that, or is this just a massive marketing gimmick?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, pushing consumers toward SPF 100 actually creates a deeply dangerous behavioral compensation. High SPF numbers give consumers a false sense of security. They apply an SPF 100, they think they're wearing an impenetrable force field, and they stay out in the direct sun for 4 hours without reapplying. But the fundamental rules of photobiology do not change regardless of the number on the bottle.
You still have to reapply.
Yes, you still need to apply it generously 20 to 30 minutes before exposure so the emulsion can set. You still need to reapply every 2 hours and immediately after swimming. And you still need to avoid peak sun hours between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m.
And it isn't just a summer beach problem either. The review points out that snow reflects nearly 80% of UV rays.
That's huge.
You're getting hit from the sky, and then you're getting hit again from the ground.
Which brings us to the most important realization of this entire review. Sunscreen is just a thin layer of lotion. It should never be your only line of defense, and it should never, ever be used as an excuse to prolong your time in the direct sun.
So Sabrina can't just rely on the cream in the bottle, especially for a 2-year-old. She needs to look at structural barriers.
Exactly.
Back in the 1980s, Australia launched this famous public health campaign called Slip, Slop, Slap. Slip on a shirt, slap on sunscreen, slap on a hat. But in 2007, they updated it because the science evolved. Now it's slip, slop, slap, seek, and slide. You seek shade, and you slide on sunglasses.
And that addition of sliding on sunglasses is absolutely critical. We focus so much on the skin, but the cellular tissue of the eyes is incredibly vulnerable to radiation. But here is the catch we mentioned at the very start of the deep dive. You cannot just wear any cheap sunglasses. Yep. If you buy dark tinted lenses from a gas station that do not have a certified UV filter, you are doing exponentially more damage to your eyes than if you wore nothing at all.
This blew my mind. Because of the mechanics of mydriasis, the dilation of the pupil, it is literally like turning off the security lights inside a bank and then opening the front doors wide open for the robbers.
Yes.
When you put a dark lens over your eye, your brain thinks it's dark out, so your pupil naturally dilates wide open to let more light in. But if that lens doesn't physically block UV rays, you have just opened the floodgates, inviting unfiltered UV radiation and dangerous blue light between 400 and 440 nanometers straight into your retina.
It's so dangerous. And frequent unprotected exposure to that specific blue light and UV radiation is a massive risk factor for macular degeneration later in life. In fact, the clinical review states that the most protective lenses aren't even the darkest ones.
Which goes against everything we think looks cool.
Right. But lenses tinted yellow or orange often provide the best optical protection against both UV and blue light. And, importantly, you need to wear them in the morning and the evening.
Really? Not noon?
No, because when the sun is high at noon, your brow bone provides natural shade. But at 8 a.m. or 5 p.m., the sun's rays are coming in parallel to your eyes. They completely bypass that structural shade.
That is fascinating. Okay, we also have to talk about the slip part, the clothing. Because simply throwing on a white cotton t-shirt doesn't mean you're actually protected. The review highlights the UPF rating system, the ultraviolet protection factor, which ranges from 15 to 50.
Clothing is an excellent physical barrier, but the microscopic weave of the fabric dictates its efficacy. The most protective clothing utilizes tightly woven fibers, dark colors, and heavy materials. Surprisingly, synthetic fabrics like nylon, elastane, and polyester are vastly superior to light cottons.
I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, but there's a major mechanical warning in the clinical data regarding water.
Right, because water changes the physical structure of the fabric.
Exactly. A wet piece of clothing lets through about half of the UV rays compared to when it's dry. When cotton fibers get wet, they actually swell and stretch, and that creates microscopic gaps that allow UV radiation to slip right through to the skin.
Wow.
Synthetics tend to hold their tight weave much better, but if you're swimming in a standard t-shirt, its protective capability basically plummets the second you hit the water.
Which brings us to the most vulnerable member of Sabrina's group. Let's say she had a newborn instead of a 2-year-old. What are the rules for an infant whose skin hasn't fully developed?
For infants under 6 months of age, the rules are very rigid. The primary strategy must be total avoidance.
Just stay out of the sun.
Keep them in the shade, put them in UPF-rated protective clothing, and use a wide-brimmed hat. Their stratum corneum is simply too thin and immature to handle chemical absorption or heavy nanoparticle loads from sunscreen.
So no sunscreen at all.
Physical filter sunscreen should only be used as an absolute last resort on tiny exposed areas, like the backs of the hands, if shade and clothing are utterly unavailable.
So what does this all mean?
It means we have to respect the power of the sun and stop fearing the very tools designed to protect us. You shouldn't be afraid of sunscreen ingredients, but you should be a highly educated consumer. Choose the right formulations, look for the CDA approval, avoid oxybenzone for children or compromised skin, and throw away your degraded expired bottles.
Right.
But most importantly, recognize that sunscreen is merely a backup system. Your tightly woven clothing, your shade-seeking habits, and the right UV-blocking sunglasses. Those are your actual first line of defense against long-term cellular damage.
And the science of defending ourselves is always moving forward, too. The review briefly touches on the future, noting that researchers are exploring oral and topical antioxidants to supplement our external sunscreens. They're looking at things like a specific form of B3 called niacinamide or a special fern extract called Polypodium leucotomos.
That's right.
They aren't replacements for sunscreen yet, but they show that we're beginning to look at repairing the cellular damage from the inside out.
And that constant evolution of science leaves us with a truly profound question to consider about our modern lifestyle. Because today, we spend the vast majority of our lives completely shielded.
Yeah, we do.
We live indoors, behind UV-blocking windows, staring at screens in climate-controlled environments.
Yeah.
We actively avoid the sun for 350 days of the year. This raises an important question. Are we fundamentally altering our evolutionary relationship with the sun?
Oh, wow.
By sheltering our skin so completely, preventing any natural acclimatization, are we making those rare, intense, unprotected beach vacations exponentially more shocking and exponentially more dangerous to our cellular biology?
It makes you look at that one-week winter getaway to Cuba a little differently, doesn't it? It is not just a relaxing change of scenery. It's an absolute biological shock to a system that has been living in the dark for 11 months. So before you head out into the light, grab a wide-brimmed hat, double-check those expiration dates so you aren't applying a broken emulsion, and make sure your sunglasses are actually protecting your eyes, not just opening the vault for the bank robbers. Enjoy the outdoors, but do it safely.